Good afternoon. Henrik, there's a message in the chat room that has a document we're using for the minutes today. And we also got an attendee list if you want to take a look at that.
Yes, I already updated it and put
you did?
A proper link to the paper, a proper link to the tool, and as well the list of attendees. So yeah, no, it's good from my perspective.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Eric, Robert, how are you doing?
Good, Dario.
Very good, thank you.
Do we have a Google Doc or something to sign in attendance?
We do indeed. It's just in the chat. If you take a look, you should be able to see that. Let me know if it doesn't for some reason.
I might have come in after you posted it, if you don't mind putting it back in.
No worries at all. Give people a minute or two and then we will kick off. People can just attach their name to the agenda, that'd be great. Attendees lists, rather. I'm not sure if those two first agenda items came from Chrome. Speak of the devil.
I think I put them in, but they are Chrome.
Got it. Thanks, Randall.
I can subscribe, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate your help with that. You produce some of the finest minutes of any meeting I've ever seen. And that's not just because you've volunteered, that is genuine praise. Jacques? Okay, should we start and then people can fill in when they, as we come through, a couple more. Okay, so thanks, Dan, for agreeing to be the scribe. Just drop the agenda back into the chat there. If people are joining, if they can just add their names to the list of attendees. And as is customary, if we could go through and welcome any new friends. Anyone want to say hi who's attending for the first time?
Yes, maybe I can say a few words.
Go for Henrik.
Yeah, so my name is Henrik Plate. I'm working with Endor Labs, where I would like to continue the works on open source security that I started many years back at SAP. Right. And maybe just a little bit on the work maybe that you know. In the past, like 2-3 years back, we were working together with the University of Bonn on this Backstabber's Knife collection. Maybe some of you have read that paper. And before that, with Serena Ponta, who's I think also on the call from SAP, we were working on Eclipse Steady, which is basically an open source vulnerability scanner. Maybe also some of you know.
Excellent. And Henrik?
Thanks.
Yeah, do you want to give an intro?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I'm Pier Giorgio Ladisa, and
Serena, could you mute perhaps? I think, thanks.
Can you hear me now? It's better now. Okay, thanks. So I was saying, my name is Pier Giorgio Ladisa, and I'm a PhD student at SAP. I was formerly a PhD student from Henrik, and now I'm below the supervision of Serena Ponta in collaboration with the University of Rennes. And the topic of my PhD is open source software supply chain attacks. And and I'm a co-author of the paper about the taxonomy of open source software supply chain attacks with Henrik and the University of Rennes.
Excellent. Thank you, Pierre.
Thanks.
Yes. So perhaps very easy for me to introduce myself at this point in time, because I've been working with Henrik on open source software security for 10 years, and I still work on the same topic, but still at SAP, and I'm now supervising Pierre George. Very easy.
Thanks, Serena. Anyone else like to do an intro? This is the first time you're here. Hey, Tom, you coming off mute?
Yeah, I'll do. Yeah, I'm Tom Ulrich. I'm a independent supply chain security consultant, and working a lot with SBOMs now and with the NTIA and now CISA initiatives. And I was quite pleased when Jonathan told me about this group, because those NTIA and CISA have been both very lacking on focus on end users. And you know, so I'm really glad to see this group operating.
Excellent. Thanks for joining, Tom. Anyone else I've missed? Most people have been here before, I think. Okay, right. So let's head through the agenda. So CVD guide for OSS consumers in vulnerability disclosure group. Who wants to take that agenda item? I think it was somewhere between Randall and Crow.
I vote Crow, but if you're not here.
I could take it, yeah. Hi, I'm Krobe. I have the opportunity to work in 46,000 OpenSSF working groups, and one of those working groups is the Vulnerability Disclosures team. We are focused on educating the world and maintainers and the ecosystem around good coordination and vulnerability sharing practices. We've historically, in the past, we've written 2 guides. One guide focused on open source maintainers, on good practices they could adopt in their projects on how to intake, triage, and then communicate vulnerabilities. And then most recently, we published a guide around focused on security researchers, on how they can best engage with open source communities and projects to report findings, and kind of just explain a little bit about how the open source handles security issues. And the group thought a wonderful next project might be a guide focused at end consumers to help educate them on how open source works and how it manages vulnerabilities and kind of places where you should be monitoring for reports, and kind of how, just in general, kind of explaining the ecosystem for consumers so that they can be better prepared as they are ingesting and using open source. So that's the idea, and then we thought this group might be a wonderful community that would have some ideas about that topic, and might be willing to collaborate on a shared guide together.
Cool, thanks, Rob. I mean, just looking at the deliverables and the missions and goals, we did actually mention this or put this down as one of our initial deliverables. Just reading from the list, it was develop guides, white papers, and materials focused on strategies and solutions for better software supply chain and open source software targeting end users. And the phase 1 we had on the list was identify which guides material is missing from the existing corpus of materials. It sounds like it would be a good fit. And I'd certainly be interested in doing that.
Yay.
Do you want to defer to Dan, though? I know you see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Do you mean specifically in the area of vulnerability? You're talking about specifically in the area of vulnerability disclosures, how vulnerability disclosures work, demystifying that space for those who are consuming open source software, that end users as we describe them.
That certainly would be one of our primary goals, and then secondarily providing information on where to look to monitor for reports as these incidents are coordinated.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. I think also just editorially, I think that something that really explains the forensic nature of these kinds of vulnerability disclosures to people that are not used to working in that way would really be valuable for this kind of group that we're talking about, this target audience, because I know it is a very different way of thinking about things when it comes to disclosure of information. Yeah. But it's so valuable. So yeah, definitely think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I second that. I'm just thinking that we, as part of that deliverables, one of our mission objectives, this sounds like one gap. We should probably get together and identify the other ones so that we can start to distribute it if people have interest. I think this is one, and even just things such as policies of ingestion, perhaps other ones, or how people think about ingesting software from an end user perspective. I often talk to people and they're looking at SBOMs, but they don't really think about the policy they need to put in place to think about what they're ingesting. Never mind SBOM, are you ingesting software with high vulnerabilities? Do you have a policy, or do you have any capability of preventing that anyway? So there's probably some guidance we need to write there as well. I think there's a bit of a takeaway there to map out that that list. So maybe I'll in some of the off sessions that we have, try and pull that together and raise it for review. But to Crobe, to your earlier point, yep, definitely. I think you got support from the group on helping with that one.
To
yep.
To the consumption point, fun fact, I get to work with another group of folks that put together a concise guide for evaluating open source software. This was primarily focused on open source developers, kind of looking at their dependencies and as they're selecting code to ingest in their own internal projects. That very easily could be augmented, expanded just to more general things to do at ingestion. So I think it would be a good starting point.
Nice. Could you drop maybe a link
best
to that?
practices working group put out that guide. If I wasn't driving to pick up my sick kid from school, I would.
I can find it.
But I
can find it.
Thanks, Dan.
Please don't stop from doing that, and try stopping raising the hand. That's keep both hands on the wheel, definitely. Whoa, this is even worse. All right, Jacques, I think you're next.
I'll never forget that facial expression.
Nope.
Yeah, I see we have Jay White, and I would say that there's a pretty good matchup with what is currently called SSC for the role of helping folks think through policies for ingestion. So I think definitely we can continue to weigh in on that topic there. I will add my voice to the chorus of I think this is a fantastic idea. I am still vague on how coordinated vulnerability occurs. For me, usually I learn through the most official, the most sanctified and sort of culturally appropriate means, Twitter. Which is, he is going to say Twitter. Hashtag, the joke was too obvious. So yeah, having some idea of how the sausage gets made would be very useful for me.
Very cool. Anyone got any additional feedback there? I think it's got a lot of support from the group. Nice one, Crobe. One addition I may put, if I may, that the SSC that you're referring to, Jacques, and Jay, I see you there on the call. We should probably get together as a group to think about feedback on the SSC, because I've got like 10 pages of feedback and I've been starting to go through with the team, but I know that others have got a lot of feedback. I think there's a SIG that's been set up, but I wonder if we have a consolidated effort. Does people want to get together as a consolidated group or join the SIG and do it there, or both? Open to suggestions on that one.
And I'm willing to meet. So we've been meeting with John, and his points are amazing. I'm willing to do you know, oh well, God, within within my bandwidth, I'm willing to meet with, and Adrian is as well. I mean, we can meet with as a in the SIG, because I believe in the SIG we're going to be more focused on. There's a couple of items here. One of them would be getting it in the proper format, proper formatting for specification purposes. We'll be thinking about that. I like to think what we come out of the working sessions will be stuff that gets put into, and we'll be trying to, you know, close PRs and close issues and all those kind of things. So a lot of the stuff that we do needs to get put in to issues and PR so they can get properly addressed. I think that might require a few separate meetings so that the SIG meetings can concentrate on you know, ratifying any kind of and anything out there PR or issue wise, and then of course governance therein. So I'm willing to do you know, I'm willing to have any meetings that are suggested to that end.
Cool. Thanks, Jay. Maybe I'll take an action that I'll set up a couple of different times. We'll put out a doodle poll, see who's interested in contributing to that feedback. We'll get together, provide that feedback in whatever form that you see appropriate. Again, PRs or whatever, we'll take that out offline. Cool. All right. Thanks, Jay. And thanks, Crow, for that that good agenda item. Moving straight on to the next one, unless we've covered that, the call for end user educational materials. Is that connected to the first one we just gone through, or a different?
No, that's connected to the education SIG.
Right.
Or working group.
Got it. Do you want to give us some more detail on that? SKF working. Yep.
No, this well, kind of, sort of, but this is more about if anyone has any educational material. We don't have end users in the educational like priorities, but it can be added. I think it depends on if anyone has anything to add. So yeah, I know that you were working on a guide, John, and I know that Dan might have guides at Sneak. I can never pronounce your company's name. I keep forgetting. I'm sorry. Sneak, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think sink because you're just gonna throw the kitchen sink at it, you know. But yeah.
Okay, so I think it kind of maps back to the same thing, is that we need to, I think, get together as a group and look through the list of material and gaps that we need to provide, right? So yes. Maybe let's send through, I think let's do it asynchronously, send through onto Slack perhaps any additional guides that we feel are missing, and perhaps we'll add that into one of the sessions that we've got going.
Yes.
We do asynchronously, and then we can come back and say, look, this is educational material. I think it makes sense to connect to the educational SIG. This is stuff that we can do with vulnerability management, connect it that way.
Yep.
Propose we get it together like that. Yeah.
I'll send a link to the spreadsheet. Crow set up a spreadsheet on Slack, so you could see what we have so far, and feel free to add anything that you think fits.
Awesome. Thanks, Randall. Makes sense. Is there a whistle on the line, or is it just my headphones? Nope, just my headphones. Okay. Keep going. So next item on the list is from Pierre and Henrique. I'd asked them to come and present the taxonomy that they've put together based upon the Backstabber's Knife Collection, which is a paper that I think a lot of us have read. A lot of good detail in there. So first of all, congrats on that paper. I think it's a great body of work and really helpful for end users particularly. But over to you, Henrik and yeah.
Yes, yeah, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present our work. So we thought of presenting around about 10 minutes and then maybe have another 5 minutes of questions. I will start with the paper, and then Pier Giorgio follows up with a visual visualization tool. Maybe let me just try to share my screen if that works.
Are these slides that you can, or is this, are there links to these things that can be, that I can strip into the minutes so that, yeah.
I already included the link to the paper that you started seeing on the screen, and also a link to the visualization tool that is on GitHub that you can, that you will also see in just a few minutes. So just a quick introduction. So this work is indeed something that we started round about, I would say, middle of 2021. It's a continuation to some extent what we have been doing before with this Backstabber's Knife collection. So here, if you remember, for those who have read it, there was already an attack tree contained in this Backstabber's Knife paper, but it was relatively small, and we thought it is worthwhile to extend this, have a more comprehensive attack tree than what we have presented back then, and also to make sure that it is more comprehensible to people consuming it. And so we came up with this work. You see the paper here, and it eventually became a taxonomy. So the idea of this relatively big attack tree is that it should be possible to, for any supply chain attack, say that is the category, the class of attack vectors that was at its root cause, right? You will see this a little bit later. And apart from, on top of building this more comprehensive and comprehensible taxonomy, we wanted to also clarify what are the existing safeguards and which safeguards would be covering different parts of that attack tree. What is the utility and cost of those safeguards? And which of the safeguards are actually in use by developers? And to this end, we have conducted a couple of, well, basically two surveys, online surveys, one with kind of 17 experts in the domain. Some come from the OpenSSF, if I'm not wrong. And then another 100 something developers in regards to the cost utility of different safeguards and whether they use them. Overall, the result is this attack tree taxonomy with round about 100 attack vectors that are linked to, in the meantime, I think more than different real world incidents, either attacks or vulnerabilities which could have led to an attack, as well as plenty of scientific literature and gray literature. I'm going to quickly show you this, but you will have a much nicer representation in just kind of 2 minutes. But what I wanted to, so here, this is basically the this taxonomy. What I wanted to raise your attention to is that what we have used, the different criteria we have used for structuring, giving structure to this attack tree. So on the very left-hand side, and I tried to zoom a little bit inside, on the very left-hand side, you have the top-level goal being to conduct an open source supply chain attack, meaning to kind of inject malicious code into an open source component, distributed such that it is downloaded, executed by downstream users. And at the first criteria for giving structure to the attack tree is the level of interference with existing projects. So you see at the bottom of the tree, the subversion of a legitimate package where the attacker has to tamper somehow with the resources of an existing project, be it the source code repository, the build system, or somehow its distribution channels. And the other two nodes have lesser interference. One is at the very top, basically developing a distinct new malicious package from scratch, which also comes with a little bit of advertisement to have downstream victims adopt it, use it. And then in the middle, all these create name confusion, typo squatting, combo squatting, and what have you, which do not really interfere with resources of a legitimate project, but kind of with the user base. And so we thought that is kind of an intermediate case. And then the next structuring levels would be for the subversion of legitimate packages, what I was mentioning before, injecting something in the source code repository at the top, in the middle, injecting something during the build of a legitimate package, or at the very bottom here, injecting something in the distribution process of how it gets from package repositories to the computers, to the build systems of developers. And then on the right-hand side, the third criterion is basically whenever there are systems involved, source code repositories, build systems, and so on, we basically have this pattern of you can either compromise that system, exploit a weak configuration, exploit a vulnerability, or you can temper or compromise the users of that system. And so that is kind of the structure or the criteria used for doing this, for structuring the tree. Right, but you will see this in a second. Pier Giorgio will walk you through this beautiful web application. And then I wanted to just very quickly raise your attention to this table, which is a summary of the feedback of experts and developers on the costs and the utilities of the different safeguards. And so what you see in the table are the 30-something safeguards we have come up with, like protect production branches and source code versioning. And for each of those safeguards, you see how useful is it according to the expert. And here you have the mean and the median. How expensive do the experts think the implementation, the use of that safeguard is, again, with mean and median. And the whole table is actually ordered according to the cost utility ratio, meaning on the top of the table, you have the one that are less costly and more useful. And at the very bottom, you have the ones that are considered more costly and less useful. And on the right-hand side, you have the feedback on developers, again, according to the cost and the usage. Right, I leave it with this. You have the link in the minutes to read through the whole paper. And with that, I would like to hand over to Pier Giorgio so he can show you the tool in action.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Let me try to see. Can you see my screen? Can you confirm?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, right. So this is how it looks like, the web application. Let's say that it started a bit like a tool that we needed for our discussion to show and to reason about the tree, to categorize the attack vectors that we used, that we categorized there. And so here, basically, you can then explore the taxonomy, right, in an interactive way. And when you click here, you can see the description here. You have also a share button to share whether you need to reference the specific attack vectors here. And here you have all the list of references attached to a specific node and the list of safeguards mapped to that node. Right, so basically you can here explore freely the resources available, and that basically supported the existence of a specific attack vector within the tree. You may encounter, especially in the structure for here, when it comes to the users, for example, that there are some nodes which don't have really attacks attached there, but this is because basically maybe there were attacks happening in other nodes, because basically here you have replicated some techniques, like for example taking over a legitimate account, and this is the very same if you, at least from a technique point of view, it's the very same if you do that on the build system or the system that is hosting the versioning control system. So right, so here basically you can inspect all the information. Here you have also search bars whether you need to locate a specific attack within the tree, so you can search and it's highlighted in the tree. And it's the same for the safeguards. Basically you can see where safeguard is mapped within the tree with this highlight, right? And if you need to access the legend, you can, about the tree. What I wanted to show you also is that you have also tabular view for both attack vectors and safeguards. So all these information are also available in a tabular view. And probably what is also interesting for you, it's the entire list of references attached here, right? And So as I told you at the beginning, it started really as a tool that we needed for our discussion, but then it turns out to be handy for threat modeling use cases. For example, we did a threat modeling workshop internally to try to reason about our internal infrastructure, how things can go wrong, and we thought that this context view about every part of the system or every part of a possible threats and the information available here were helpful, at least in this kind of use cases. But another point about releasing it open source is that we are trying our best to maintain all the resources updated as soon as a new attack is going on. But this is why we thought to discuss with you about the tool itself, because we thought that having it below the OpenSSF umbrella and having a community really that can maintain the tool or maintain at least the references or all the information there, we think it's really important to.
Maybe one quick additional note on the possible use cases, and I think this is why it fits to this work group. So clearly, I think this is a very helpful resource for training and awareness and education purposes, right? Pier Giorgio also mentioned that we have used it in the past for threat modeling, but I think there are maybe other use cases. One would be to, in fact, scope penetration tests, because it's very easy to say to the penetration testers, well, if you look at our development infrastructure at our company, please, these are the things that are in the scope, and these other things, please do not do this. This would be another use case. And so I think there are maybe more use cases, and we would be happy to explore this with you. And coming back to the second point raised by Pier Giorgio, I think, and we knew this from the beginning when developing this, that such a tool under SAP's GitHub organization doesn't make so much sense. We, of course, do not have the same visibility and then the same possibilities for growing a community around such work. And that's why we thought of proposing and asking whether you think there's any sense in moving this over in one or the other way.
Right. Thanks, Henrik. Just to add from my side, I found this useful, apart from the paper being very, very useful. So I've put together a threat model that I'm trying to change and work with a couple of others and Krobe on changing it into an architecture view of sort of supply chain. But what I was doing with that threat model and the architectural view was then trying to map the relevant threats against it, so that I could understand where to apply more of our resources in protecting and mitigating some of these, the threats that we were, or attack vectors. So I started with a threat model, and then it quickly got to the point where I needed to have some way of classifying the different threats to figure out where on the threat model it was actually going to go. And that drew me straight to the taxonomy, which I figured was actually quite useful to then map to the threat model. So I wasn't aware that you were doing the threat model as well in SAP, Pierre. So cool. So I'd mapped it to the threat model and taxonomy, and then the bit that I think is missing, or the bit I was trying to figure out from that point, was the prevalence of these different attacks. So I was going through the Inquitel data to try and figure out how frequent were these different attack vectors applied to those threats based upon that taxonomy, with a view of trying to probabilistically figure out where within that that architecture I needed to really put a lot more mitigation. So I'd be interested in adding that prevalence data into it, or starting to map that, and maybe cross-referencing with Inquitel or some of the other data sets I'm aware of, to try and come up with more of a probabilistic approach of figuring out what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, what I wanted to say that, for example, you mentioned Inquitel, they had this data set about compromises. Basically, I reviewed this was one of the source that we used to basically put all the references in within the attack tree. We had a discussion with Henrik, I think, a couple of weeks ago about, for example, having this kind of feature or visualization about increasing, for example, the size of a node depending on how many attacks were attached to there. And we were discussing a bit, and this is why I would like to have also your feedback, because my point of view is that or at least my fear is that it doesn't mean much that if we have less resources regarding to a specific attack that is the, let's say, the less used attack. This is my fear. I mean, and this is why I didn't want to give an impression with a visualization tool to pass a message that may be wrong, because we may not have enough resources or capabilities to track a specific attacks or not. But definitely is interesting to your point of view and your use case. I agree.
Shaq?
Yes, I have a few quick things. First one is I was a huge fan of Backstabber's knife collection, together with Towards Measuring Supply Chain Attacks and Package Managers for Interpreted Languages paper. It's had a huge impact on how we think about things at Shopify, and it's why I'm here today. So thank you for that. A very small note about the visualization. I would be cautious about using red and green as colors that indicate something. That's not any good for people who are colorblind. Unfortunately, they won't be able to distinguish between them. So that's something to look into. I guess one question I have is, in terms of adoption, one thing we struggle with in the end user group is like, how do all these different things fit together that the OpenSSF sponsors? And I suspect one of the questions will be like, okay, you've got this taxonomy. Where does that fit with SALSA, and where does that fit with SSC? Both of which have embedded in them models of the universe and information about attacks and countermeasures and ways of clustering those together.
Yes. Maybe two quick answers. For the colorblind, in fact, there are also different field patterns, so that should be done already.
Okay. Thank you.
We had that feedback already in the past. That's why we did it. And for what concerns linking the different initiatives, I agree that it's difficult. There are so many things going on in parallel, and sometimes you wonder how they fit together. One feedback is that I think also in SALSA you have kind of a system model at some point in time with source code repository, build server, and I think even package repositories. And so that is pretty close to what we were using for structuring parts of the attack tree. And the second thing, and I'm not sure whether this became so clear in Pier Giorgio's presentation, one idea is that if you select the safeguard, you would highlight all the attack vectors that are covered. And so giving you a feeling for, if you implement this thing, this is what you would be partially, hopefully completely mitigating. And learn from that, these are parts still open that you need to cover in different ways. So this is another kind of use case, if you want, for such a taxonomy, I think.
Yes. And what I would say very quickly, Jonathan, sorry to interrupt you. I think the question from folks is going to be, I have two things now, the taxonomy and SALSA, which give me guidance on which countermeasures to use. And in the situation that one covers something that the other doesn't, or where they both cover something but they give different answers about what's going on or what could be done, it could cause a lot of angst.
Yeah. Can I take this question? Because I had the opportunity just to look at SALSA and different, let's say, proposals that we have nowadays, even this new document from NSA and CISA. So for what concerns the work of the taxonomy, our first goal was to systematize the knowledge about the threats, right? You can I think, I mean, an analogy could be to see it like, for example, the Mitra attack. in the sense that it's a way to explain how compromises happen in the open source space, right? While for Salsa, they are, let's say, providing level of maturity, we can say that, for what concerns the integrity, how to preserve the integrity in the supply chain, right? So, and of course, I agree with you then on the fact that, there could be some confusion for what concerns the safeguards. So we could think about, for example, how to better handle or integrate Salsa with giving it more visibility within the tool or the Risk Explorer tool. But I think the scope is a bit different, right? Because again, the taxonomy is trying to describe how attacks happened and which are the threats there, and Salsa is providing you guidance or level of maturity depending on what and where you put some safeguards, right? I don't know if this answered your question or.
It sort of does, but I don't want to hold up the train forever. So I think Jonathan's next.
Well,
yeah,
I just wonder if this is an opportunity, right? Because I see at OSSF and in the industry in general, we've got lots of seedling projects and ideas around how we're addressing supply chain. And I think we've started to get now some decent traction in a couple of areas. But I think from an end user perspective, we're the ones at the coalface trying to implement some of these things. And we have a view perhaps of how you would string these technologies and specifications together to form a capability from an enterprise perspective. So it seems to me that, the work that Krob is leading, trying to put together an architecture of what a supply chain would look like and where the OSSF projects perhaps fits, gives that base platform architecture of what the infrastructure looks like, supply chain looks like. And then if we apply a taxonomy like this that identifies the threats and where the threats actually lay within that threat model, and then the back part, the sort of mitigations, perhaps we review those mitigations as we leverage things like Salsa and SSC. So we've got an infrastructure underneath with the Krob architecture. We've got a taxonomy to define what the attacks are. And then we look at the different standards or, emerging standards, SSC and Salsa, and say, right, this is how they connect. Maybe SSC is at the front with Salsa looking at the back after you've got those capabilities in place, and then perhaps change the data, because you definitely don't want two sets of clashing mitigations, right? But make sure that we change the feedback and mitigations and point to perhaps part of SSC or part of Salsa once we've agreed as a wider group what that mitigation would be. So we kind of tie the thing together, and we have an architecture to figure out what the landscape looks like. We need a taxonomy to reason about those attacks, and then you have the mitigations at the back. And then I think the bit that's missing there is that prevalence bit, where given that taxonomy, we start to add the prevalence of the attacks we see from different data sources. And now we've got something that people can really use, right? We're telling people this is where the attacks are coming from in this part of your architecture. And this is clear definition of what you need to go after and mitigate. And I think we're I wonder if we're in a kind of position to pull that stuff together because we see it from an end user or enterprise view. That's just something I think might be worth considering. Because we're not just looking at a smaller part, we're looking at pulling the whole lot together of a consolidated whole. And you're right, it's like, well, we can't just decide, hey, we've got a new version of these mitigations, let's go. No, we need to work together with different peoples and figure out, look, the standard suggests this, that, and the other, provide the appropriate feedback, and that's canonical mitigation. But I think if we got a taxonomy and things underneath, I think that starts to help. Just my thoughts around that one. And any feedback on that one, then I'll defer to Jay. Sounds like Krob, you thumbs up. And a heart. I'm touched. I'm still shocked that you're driving, but we'll move on from that.
Just got home.
Good. Okay, excellent. Jay, I'll defer to you.
Yeah, you know what, John? I mean, I'd like to add to that, but I don't think I have anything to add to that. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth. You know, at the time of your writing, and guys, I do have to say, having, about what year is this, 2022, about a good 7 or 8 years ago, I had the pleasure of writing a dissertation. So when I saw your scholarly piece there, I was happy to see the RQ1, RQ2. I could read those. I could read some of the stuff, and I pulled up the document and started to look through that. So I appreciate how you put that together. Echoing what John said, this piece, especially the taxonomy, these things can all be joined together. Keeping things separate is a past situation. We could bring that stuff together and clearly find bridges that links each of these things to make it more complete. Hell, I would even say something a little bit more provocative and say, looking at this taxonomy could be something that could be built out such that it does what MITRE does, but specifically for supply chain security and understanding a true, especially with what CROB is doing, understanding what that supply chain attack surface and attack landscape actually looks like, and how it will evolve over time. Right, so that's the other thing that I think about, that's top of mind for me all the time, not just today, but how does that scale and how does that evolve over time, and what can we foresee based on information that we're putting together today? And we have some smart people in the room that can do that.
Yep, agree.
So I mean, maybe to reiterate what I think was said before. So I think the taxonomy is really taking this perspective of the attacker, which is maybe different from some of the other works. But again, I totally agree that the safeguards need to be well aligned with all the other initiatives. Otherwise, this doesn't make sense and will only cause confusion. So in general, I have the feeling there is more positive confirming feedback on the possibilities to discuss this further and maybe work on this together. What would be concrete, pragmatic next steps to drive this forward?
I was going to sort of raise that or question that myself, and we've got CROB on the line. You are a veritable member of the TAC. I was wondering, I wonder if we put a proposal together to the TAC that, look, there's a way of connecting these different projects together. And I think it's not like taxonomy is the glue necessarily, but it's an additional one. I'd propose that maybe we propose to adopt the taxonomy and have the TAC decide where that goes. But it's similar to the SSC conversation in that, look, CROB, we're working on the architecture underneath. Taxonomy needs to go on top and then connect in SSC and SALSA. Is that an appropriate approach architecture? And then if that is the case, let's set that maybe up as some form of a, I don't want to use the word working group or project. There you go. I don't know what to call it now, but
the initiative project is used for code.
Thank you, initiative. And also look at sort of adopting the taxonomy also as part of that, or connecting into that initiative. Does that sound like something we could raise to the TAC, or how would you? Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and we're more and more grappling with these ideas or efforts that bridge many groups. So I think this would be very good to bring to the TAC, and maybe we also kind of help standardize, kind of what proceduralize how these types of cross-foundation things get put in.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think we should propose it up. You should have be opinionated with what your proposal is. Like, we would like to create a special interest group, or we need to connect these different groups and bring that forward. But I think that's definitely something the TAC would like to talk about. Great.
So I think if we can take, maybe I'll propose we'll do two things to the TAC. One is that joined up initiative, propose that, number one, and second is the kind of basic suggest adoption of the taxonomy to the TAC also. I don't know if it's the same thing or is it two separate things, but it's, yep, I got thumbs up from Jacques. Yep. Probe. Yep. Okay. Any feedback on that?
Yeah, I think what we may want to do as well, because of the joint part of it, because I'm in, but Salsa should hear this too, right? And having sat in the room with them, I think this would be beneficial as well, so that maybe when it gets proposed to the TAC, we're all in the room for that.
Yep. Good
right.
call.
So that it looks like that we're in a joint agreement on that direction that we're heading in. Right. So
Yep.
so that's something I'll add to that.
Good call. Let's ensure that we reach out to a couple of additional members and socialize it as on the way to the TAC. Yep. Okay.
So John, who do you think or who might volunteer to write this proposal we're talking about?
I'm going to take one for the team and have the first shot at that proposal, but I'm not going to be able to do all of it, I think. But I will start with that. I'm taking a couple of actions today, I think, but I will write up that proposal. I think it's really important.
Okay.
And of course, we would be helping wherever needed.
Thanks, Henrik. All right, good. I think we've got some good output there. Right, in terms of the goodness of the order, the next item on the agenda is additional notes from working groups. So can I open it to anyone on the call to give any feedback from any pertinent working groups that we've attended over the last 2 weeks that you'd like to bring to the table? If not, we will move on. We will put that matrix together so that we can start to align people, I think, soon. Andrew?
Yeah, can we make that a priority too? We've been talking about that. Not sure who's the best person. Is there, maybe Krob, you have some information on this. Is there a OpenSSF taxonomy or diagram of all the different working groups and their activities incorporated in the mobilization plan today?
There is
As a matter
a
of
small cobble of people that have assembled to start to work on that.
Okay.
So
Under
I
what
can show you
auspice?
an initial picture, but it is not going to be our final deliverable.
Okay. And is this being done under one of the working groups?
This is a group of diagram enthusiasts.
That was the sort of picture I was referring to earlier, Andrew.
Okay. Okay.
But Chewy, is there anyone who would like to take the pen on providing that initial matrix? Potentially dive into that working group as well, or sorry, the group of diagram enthusiasts, or putting together that initial matrix? I'd love to. I'm just aware that I'm signing up quite a bit so far in this one. Okay, look, I think if there's no one picking that one up, maybe we put it down as in the notes as an item, and if people are able to pick it up between now and then, please do so. I will endeavor to do that, but I'm going to be a bit short in time doing the other work we've taken on.
Just to be clear, the action or the item that needs doing it, so I'm admitting it, is providing feedback to the diagrammers. No?
I think it's creating the matrix or initial matrix of the different working groups we would like to attend as a group, and then putting a accountable owners. I mean, what I could just ask right now is there any particular working group we feel we need to have direct input in? I'd suggest the education working group, vulnerability management, and integrity group from the start.
Best practices,
Those are
probably.
I heard best practices. Randall, you were adding as well.
I'm thinking about best practices. It probably would be a good idea.
Best
So
practices
probably,
too.
yeah, because there's
I
a
think-
lot that happens in best practices.
Great. I think there's the CISA working groups and also the SSC and SALSA groups that we should add there too.
And although it's not well, I won't put any qualifiers on it. Probably the marketing group, which I'm on. we want to make sure our message is incorporated in all the different output produced by that group.
Good call. Did you get those, Dan? That was a quick fire.
I did. And unfortunately, I've got to drop. I'm sorry.
No problem at all, Dan. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you.
I think we're good.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Okay. Ciao.
So I think we've had a good shot of creating that matrix already. So that's crowdsourcing at its best. Thank you for that. And the last to announce is any other business for the group.
So I just want to mention, if some of these members, I'm not sure if anyone here is going to be in Tahoe for that event. Hopefully, it'd be, if we have a few folks from the end user working group, it'd be great. I'm happy to put together and host a birds of a feather session at the local pub in the hotel. If anyone wants to let me know, happy to organize that. Or I also want to put a plug in for one of our sister organizations event, New York, and in New York, FINOS is having their open source strategy forum, and hopefully Jonathan and I will be presenting at that. I'm waiting for confirmation from Jonathan. We may be given a keynote there if we can close that. But it's a good event, and if you have any interest in finding out what's going on in open source and financial services, you'll hear a whole bunch of interesting presentations from some of the larger banks in the world on what they're doing on open source, and what I want to inject, and hopefully Jonathan will be there with me, is this whole software supply chain security elements to the conversation there, which they've said they're really interested in, want to make sure that we are getting across in some way, shape, or form. So that's December 8th in New York. So if anybody's happens to be based there or can make it, it's actually a really good event.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. Anything else? No. Okay. Well, look, we'll close a few minutes early, but thank you very much for everyone's input. I think it's been really useful. Thank you, Henrik and Pierre, for the presentation, and good work on Backstabber's Knife, and quite a lot of actions, more progress. So thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.